So good evening, everybody, again, and welcome to the first day of Social Sciences Graduate School Week. I am your host, AJ Aronstein. I'm one of the two deans of Beyond Barnard. Appreciate you all making time for us today. Throughout this week, we're going to be talking about a range of topics related to graduate school in the social sciences, and today's theme is navigating options and reflecting on possibilities. So I'll go through what that could potentially mean and also give you a quick overview on what to expect for this entire week of programming. As always, at the top, hope you're doing well. Hope you're staying relatively cool. If you're on the East Coast, it's a scorcher. I hope your families are well and that some of you might be looking forward to the start of the academic year, which, believe it or not, is just a few short weeks away. Hard to believe because it feels like just a couple of days ago we kicked off Summer Colloquium 2020, which for those of you who are veterans of the programming already at this point, and I see some familiar names here in the chat, you know this has been about 75 programs offered to students and alumni of Barnard College to basically tap into the community, learn a whole host of skills, keep you advancing in your career, and give you some things to put on your resume about what you participated in this summer. And we'll talk more about Colloquium across the whole week, and I hope you've been taking advantage. The link is there, and I'll share it throughout the chat as well. What to expect from graduate school in the social sciences week. I'm really excited to do this program, and then it's going to be followed by graduate school in the humanities week. And I think it's important because graduate school is so substantively different in these disciplines than, let's say, graduate school in the health professions or in law school. And I know that so many students and alumni have approached both myself and so many of the members on our advising team about applying to a range of graduate programs at the master's and doctoral level. So what I want to do today is give you a basic introduction to some of the most common questions that we get about graduate school in the social sciences. I'll be doing some general best practices work, but then also some drilling into some specific issues that attend to social sciences disciplines. On Tuesday, tomorrow, we'll go through the application process. How do you chart an application process, whether you're applying to master's programs or PhD programs? When should you start thinking about applying, asking about letters of recommendation, writing your personal statement, editing the kind of writing sample that you're going to be asked to submit to programs, etc. Wednesday, we'll do a best practices workshop on the personal statement itself. This, to me, is the most important document of any graduate application, other than all of the things that you've already done in your courses, your grades, but really your statement of academic intent, sometimes called your personal statement, will constitute the most important document when you're submitting applications to these programs. And I want to go over some of the common mistakes and best practices there. On Thursday, we have a fantastic panel of Barnard alumni who are currently in social sciences doctoral programs, some of whom completed master's programs on the way to their PhD. And on Friday, we'll round it out with a faculty panel. I want to make sure that we have some shared expectations about what to get out of this week. So I'm not going to be drilling directly into everything you need to know about just political science or just sociology. So if you're looking for real disciplinary deep dives, this might not be the best 5 days for you, but I promise that no matter what discipline you're interested in, a lot of the best practices that I'm sharing will be about fields, will be resonant across fields. And of course, as always, I will do some work to talk about what distinguishes the social sciences and the programs that are offered in these fields versus, let's say, STEM or the humanities. So what can you expect for today? Well, by the end of today, I'm hoping that you'll be able to research graduate programs with more context about what you can and should be looking for in those programs. I'm hoping that you'll be able to describe some differences between the undergraduate and graduate program search. So in other words, I want you to start to get used to the fact that searching for a graduate program in the social sciences is substantively different than the way that you apply to undergraduate collegiate institutions like Barnard. I want to give you some tools for reflecting on your graduate school goals, give you some ideas about how to ask yourself tough questions about why you want to pursue graduate school, and then some also tactical steps to go through in the next coming weeks throughout the fall semester, no matter whether you're intending on applying this fall or beyond. Throughout the talk tonight, I hope that you will add your questions to the chat, and I can try to get to them throughout the conversation, but of course, as always, there'll be time for questions at the end as well. So here's what else to expect today. As always, I have a theme for my presentation. Today is this adorable pair of bulldogs that I met this weekend when I got out to the Catskills, a full 200 miles away, y'all. It felt like I was in a different country. Thumbs up for good dogs. They're all good dogs. I hope that you all have dogs. And if you want me to add dogs to the presentations this week that you own or that you want to make famous on our Instagram, I will always accept your pictures of doggos. They are keeping me mentally healthy. As long as the news is as bad as it's been, I try to make friends with as many dogs as possible. So this is Izzy. This is the lady bulldog. She was cute. She went on a hike with me. But I want to know, to start with, what are some of the things that you're expecting both out of this week and when it comes to some of the things that you're thinking about for the longer term? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch a poll really quickly. There's 3 quick questions. So the first is, which disciplines are you interested in studying at the graduate level? And for all of these questions, you can answer multiple times. The second is, which kinds of degree programs are you interested in? Master's, PhD, MPP, MPH, JD, MD, gotta go. Whoops, wrong Zoom, really gotta go. And then the last one is, what are some of the questions on your mind? So it's helpful for me to know what you're thinking about as you approach the conversation this week. Can everybody see the poll? I see nobody's voted yet. So maybe that's just because okay, got it. Thanks for the thumbs up, appreciate it as always. So I'm gonna let those results come in. And in the meantime, I'm gonna talk through a couple of things that are considerations that I'd like you to have on your mind. I talked about this in STEM Careers Week as well. When it comes to graduate school, it's really important to remember that it's not about the letters behind your name. So people really get fixated on this idea that the doctoral degree or the JD or the MD is the most prestigious degree that they're interested in pursuing. And so therefore, that is the reason to pursue that degree. And I really think it's much more at this point about the knowledge that you want to pursue at the graduate level and why you want to pursue that knowledge. Having a really good idea of what graduate school can give to you, what you can get out of graduate school, and what you can bring to graduate communities is a much better way of assessing your fitness and readiness for graduate school than just thinking abstractly about differences between PhDs, MDs, JDs, and all of these things. So I see a lot of master's programs, and we'll talk a ton about master's programs today, and that's evening out with some PhDs. MPH, I want to lump in a little bit with the master's programs for the purposes of our conversation this evening. We've got a couple of great lawyers and doctors on the call too. And so let's make sure that we connect on resources at Beyond Barnard to focus on those programs. So I have to say that much more than even when I was in college almost 20 years ago, there's so much more of an appetite for social scientists in the legal and medical professions. So it's good news for those of you who are interested in a range of programs. I want to see what everybody thought was the funniest answer for how you're doing. All things considered, not bad. Holding steady. I'm glad to spend time with family, friends, and pets. I'm going to end the poll and I'll share the results with you now. Looks like we have a ton of psychologists on the call tonight, which is great. As usual, psychology is one of the largest majors at Barnard. We'll talk about psychology. I also talked a little bit about psych as a STEM field in the previous presentation. Looks like many of you are interested in masters and PhDs, which is great. How do you pick a program? We're going to go through a lot. And just the question of whether you should go to graduate school being on your mind, although I guess I put it as, should I go to graduate school? Sorry, guys, can't be perfect 100% at the time. But I'm glad to see that, you know, some of you are glad to be with family and friends, maybe not bad, eating your ice cream. And believe me, I totally get it. I'm not sure what school looks like in the fall, but I know that we will be all together when we get there. So there are the results. I just shared them with you so that you all have a sense of where you are. Thanks to everybody who filled out the poll. Here's the rest of our agenda as we kind of go through this first 45 minutes, first hour really, together this week. So I want to start by reflecting on your intentions, what you're thinking about when it comes to graduate school, give you an idea of what some programs look like, move on to how you start to decide which kinds of programs might be a good fit, and then move on to questions and, again, those next steps that you can take this fall. So let's start with reflecting on your intentions. And I want to get a little bit fancy with Zoom here. First of all, that's my lovely wife, Gina, sitting on a couch in the middle of our work from home day in the Catskills. That's Ollie, that's the big boy. who apparently wasn't supposed to be on that couch, but clearly Ollie likes naps and also seems to like Gina, which is totally fine by me. So what I want you to do in the next couple of minutes is we're going to get fancy in Zoom, and I'm going to break you out into rooms. And I don't want you to freak out about this. This is not meant to be a crazy exercise. What we're going to do is put you into really small groups of 3 to 4. And just like, I feel like in these Zoom meetings, we don't get enough chance to talk to each other. Everybody's off camera. I can't even see your faces. It's kind of a bummer. But I'm going to put you in the breakout rooms. And what I'd like you to do is just talk a little bit about why you're interested in graduate school and maybe some of the things that you're expecting about what graduate school entails, okay? But I also really want you to focus then about what you like about your work, right? That's actually where I really want you to focus. What do you enjoy about work in social sciences disciplines? Is it research? Is it collaborations with faculty? Is it group work? Is it independent work? Talk about some of the things that are driving you to think about graduate school. And then after, it won't be too long, we'll spend about 5 minutes in small groups and we'll come back together. And if we could just kind of do an open free-for-all report out on some things that people found, and I'll share those in a Google Doc with everybody at the end of the program. All right, so I'm going to create the breakout room. You will again be out of earshot. Spend 5 minutes, come back together. And you're going to have to click to get into a room shortly. Here you go. So I'm going to resume the recording. Hope that was productive for those of you who are already back. We're going to give the other folks about 30 seconds, and Zoom will bring them back into the main room. If you want and would prefer to share via text, you can actually type how the room went. So I'm just going to repeat that. If you want to share some of the findings from your group, here's a doc that I just created that we can all share as kind of collective learnings for the week. And if you want to just type in some of the things that you talked about, some of the things that you were thinking about, like what elements of social sciences work does your group seem to value? And at this point, if any of you all want to shout out some of the things that you discussed, whether it was about research, whether it was about coursework, whether it was about yes, I could put my email in there. If you have a chance to share it via text, great. If you want to shout out anything just to start the conversation going, we'll talk for just a couple of minutes before we go back into the presentation. But what are some of the things people talked about? Anybody want to dive in?
My group, we talked about how most of us, we have like kind of interdisciplinary majors like right now at Barnard. So we would maybe be looking at like trying to figure out what programs we can use to kind of narrow into a specific career, or like one person wanted to do research and like maybe be like work in academia or something. Other people were like interested in nonprofits and stuff like that. Just kind of trying to figure out like what exactly maybe like going to grad school could do for us in terms of our longer term goals, because like none of us really knew.
That's great. I mean, that's good to hear though. So it sounds like maybe you're thinking about what you enjoy, and it could drag you into multiple directions, right? Academia, nonprofits, et cetera. So Caroline also weighed in here, talked about continuing research and gaining specific credits, certificates, and licenses. And this is a big question too, right? Do you go to graduate school to get a licensure to pursue a particular kind of professional track? I mean, I think that's a big issue, and we'll talk about that with respect to master's programs. especially. And I don't think that PhDs really, and this is maybe a distinction we'll continue to talk about throughout the entire week, getting a kind of professional licensure with respect to graduate programs is not really going to be the case outside of the field of psychology when it comes to the social sciences disciplines, right? So if you want to be a practicing clinical psychologist, a PhD can be extremely helpful and is in some cases, depending on what you want to do with your education, necessary. However, with lots of other master's programs, some master's programs, social work programs, some public policy programs will grant you a certificate or certification to do a particular kind of work. What else was on some people's mind? So yeah, more on the research academic side of the work. Okay, I like that. Has anybody heard anything about kind of the independent versus collaborative nature of graduate school? I'm curious to hear if you've heard any kind of horror stories or like really good stories about graduate school. I love that, Elizabeth. Nope. Anything else that people want to share from things they discussed?
One thing that our group discussed too is just how COVID is impacting our decision to apply to grad school and what that's going to look like. And, if it's the right time to go to grad school versus applying for a job in a very unsure market.
I think that's a really good question. And let's dive into that a little bit later in today's conversation as well. This is another theme that will come up over and over again this week. All right, so let's kind of put a pin in that for now, and let's keep going. So what do some programs look like? And here's where I really kind of want to start talking about the difference between master's programs and PhD programs. And I think that some of the ways in which these are different from one another can help delineate decisions about whether now is the right time, whether what you want to do is pursue a particular career objective or whether you want to pursue a research agenda. And again, I'm going to try to say a few things that focus specifically on the social sciences. So in almost all cases, master's programs are going to be shorter term than PhDs. Everybody kind of has a sense of this. From 9-month in some cases, master's programs, for example, the MAPSS or MAPS at the University of Chicago, which is the Master of Arts program in social sciences, is a 9-month program with a 3-month thesis at the end of it. So it's very short term to 2 to 3 year programs. So typically when you're looking at something like master's in social work, if you're looking to be a practicing social worker in a kind of clinical context, those can be up to 3 years. I know of very few master's programs that take 4 years, although there are some joint programs like JD MAs, which can be popular in fields like political science or sociology especially, sometimes JD plus divinity. Those can take up to 4 years. Master's programs are especially good at helping you explore whether you want a PhD after that course of study, whether you want to pursue additional graduate work, or if you want to take a master's education into a career field. A question I get all of the time, and I think this is the case for master's folks in social sciences particularly, is will a master's degree inflect my earnings potential at the entry level? So if I go directly from undergraduate into a master's program, will that substantively change my earnings potential? I'll talk about that in a second. Master's programs are also really good for changing your academic discipline. So for example, if you're currently in sociology and you're really interested in a political science program, you might consider a master's degree as a way to bulk up your coursework, do a thesis project specifically in political science, and then apply to PhD programs within that discipline. This question of interdisciplinarity came up just a moment ago, and I want to say something about the differences between your undergraduate education and the way you position yourself for graduate education at the master's and PhD levels. Interdisciplinarity is fantastic. Everybody likes to talk about interdisciplinarity, but when it comes to PhD programs, it's really important to show an admissions committee that you know how to focus along the lines of a discipline in the academic field that that you can focus disciplinarily so that you're not a political scientist, dance major, biologist, But instead, let's say you're applying to a political science PhD, you know what the discipline of political science is about, and you're ready to commit to political science. A master's program can help make that happen. It can help clarify those interdisciplinary ambitions through the lens of a single discipline. You can use a master's program to diversify the faculty letters of recommendation that you get, and also add an institutional affiliation to your resume or CV. This is in some respects the way that lots of people use Columbia, doing a master's at Columbia before then proceeding to another institution, getting more faculty from the Barnard-Columbia University ecosystem. Sometimes folks use it to go out to the Midwest and do a master's program at an institution like Northwestern so that you're closer to PhD programs in that region. There are lots of different reasons why you might want to use a master's program to diversify your credentials. We could talk about some in specific as well. You might have had a GPA in college that you want to boost. And I would say with respect to doctoral programs especially, master's programs are really good at kind of cleaning the record of your academic career. In fact, if you're doing better at the master's level than you did in an undergrad program, that almost matters more than doing exceptionally well throughout the entire length of your undergraduate career. So just because your GPA might not be where you exactly want it to be by the end of Barnard, a master's program can help bulk up your GPA credentials, show that you had the ability to refocus your academic intentions, your ambitions, your goals, and your performance, and then do really well in PhD programs. Additionally, you can complete more foundational coursework. So sometimes you decide you want to be an economics graduate student, but you're missing a couple of foundational courses. Let's say you major in sociology first and you get a minor in econ, and you're missing a couple of key courses that would prepare you for PhD work. Master's program is a good place to get that kind of foundation under your belt. And I think when you go into a master's program, you should know that you want to write a thesis project. So thesis is typically in a master's program going to be from 10 to 30 pages in length. Very often your master's level thesis in the social sciences will be a little longer than those of your humanistic counterparts, because you'll have more data to crunch and more of a methods section to your thesis project. But essentially a thesis for many master's programs becomes either the cornerstone of your subsequent doctoral applications, or becomes a real demonstration of your commitment to a kind of professional practice that you can use to pursue a career option at the conclusion of the program. PhD programs, much longer term. We'll talk about some of the disciplinary lengths when I get to talk about some discipline breakdowns. You want to demonstrate your commitment, your deep commitment, not only to a discipline, but to a subfield within that discipline. So if you're not sure whether you want to be a sociologist or a political scientist, it might be that you need clarification at the master's program level, because once you apply to a PhD program, no one's going to hold you to what's in your application. You won't have to study just the thing that you say you want to study when it comes to a specific project. But a PhD represents a long-term commitment in terms of your time, typically 5 to 9 years in the social sciences, from 5 to 6 at the low end for economists and psychologists, to 8, 9, and even 10 for anthropologists, where there's a lot more field work, sometimes languages, etc. A question came in to me about different programs within the same area having different attitudes. Some can be more collaborative and others can be more competitive. This is absolutely the case between institutions. And when I talk about picking specific programs, picking specific institutions, I'll talk a little bit about that. It can be different across institutions. In fields like psychology, where there are lab components, it can even be different from PI to PI within a single department. It's important to suss some of this out, and the way you get to that is through research, through alumni, through current students, and through faculty both at Barnard and at the institution. We'll talk more about that as well. A PhD is really about depth of study. It's about hyper-specialization within a discipline. It's going to call upon you to conduct years of independent research, definitely under the guidance of faculty mentors. Typically on a dissertation committee in the social sciences, you'll have 3 to 4 faculty members who will serve as your guides, with one faculty member being your primary mentor or advisor. But much of this work will be independent. It will be a project that you define very much in the area of your own interest. And if that excites you, that's good news if you're interested in a PhD. You're going to be called upon to produce original scholarship for your subfield and for the discipline more widely. And what that means is you're going to be presenting at conferences, you'll be trying to publish journal articles towards the latter years of your PhD likely, and you'll ultimately produce a dissertation, which is typically in the social sciences between 3 to 4 short papers in economics, which is a discipline that privileges journal article production, to 300-page book length anthropology, sociology, and sometimes political science thesis projects. So the range of the project that you produce in a PhD can be wide in the social sciences. I like to think about individual programs as a matrix of opportunity costs. And so I want to talk about all of these different areas and then turn back to master's versus PhD programs and start to give you an idea about how to compare and contrast programs from one another. But first off, just a pull up, how's everybody doing? Give me a thumbs up. I wish there was a thumbs down, like you could tell me like things were not going well, and that would be kind of fun for me. Okay, so enough thumbs up that I think that I'm in the right area. But again, if you have questions throughout, you can shoot them privately to me in the chat. So I've put all of these out here just so that you can understand on the next 2 slides what they're supposed to be standing in for. So the first is time. Time in your 20s typically, between 22 and 30, the bulk of individuals admitted to graduate programs are in that age range. However, there are definitely folks in their 30s and 40s who go back to graduate school even after that. So there's no real limit to when you can go back to graduate school, but knowing this particular audience, I'm going to focus on the notion that you'll be spending a lot of your 20s in graduate school. You'll be spending a lot of money on master's programs in particular. While PhD programs are funded, you also need to think about delaying major earnings for some set of those years in your 20s. The bag, for some reason, is my kind of like metonym for work. So like thinking about creative career opportunities and thinking about how different degrees will inflect your career possibilities. I think this next one with the 6 phases, you need to think about how you are going to spend time with both faculty, mentors, and colleagues in graduate programs that's doing some of that research to understand whether individual departments are competitive or collaborative, whether a faculty advisor has attentiveness to issues of identity and inclusion, or whether they are coming at these questions as a bit of a novice. These are questions you can ask as you're applying to programs, and there's certainly questions you can ask us about. But you want to feel comfortable with the cohort that you're entering and confident that you're able to spend productive intellectual time with the people that you're studying with. Geographic considerations are always important. I put the Empire State Building because somehow Barnard sucks you all into New York, even if you're not from here, and many of you want to stay. I think you need to think about the kind of research that you'll be producing. And then the last 2 here, I think there are some Barnard wildcards that you should consider as you're thinking about programs, and just other things that can make you happy as a graduate student. So I'm going to lay these out. I'm not going to go through all of the bullet points, but I'll share these slides at the end of today, and you can start taking a look, and they can help guide some of your thinking about graduate programs. Like I said, a master's program is typically 1 to 2 years, mostly made of coursework, and you'll have a culminating thesis project or in some instances a practicum. In terms of tuition in the social sciences, it can be pretty hefty. Some schools will provide what they call merit aid, which is essentially a reduction in the sticker price of tuition. So although it might say it's $50,000 for a 2-year program, many master's programs, once you're in, will offer you $20,000 in financial aid, or merit aid is what they'll end up calling it. The number of scholarships for master's programs in the social sciences is relatively low. And I have to say that in terms of post-degree, it varies by discipline. Disciplines like economics can handsomely reward a master's program in that field. Programs in social sciences programs in fields like sociology and political science may not radically transform your earnings potential in the early part of your career, but after several years of work, returning to a program to get a certification, to get additional training, and to level up your career can at that point radically transform how much money you're making. When it comes to access to faculty, I always have students really push programs on this. To what degree do master's students have access to the fieldwork that faculty are conducting? To what extent are they put into journal projects? How much individual attention do you get in advising? And how common is it for faculty to write letters of recommendation for subsequent doctoral positions or get career advice? These are questions you want to be asking yourself at the master's level in the social sciences for sure. When it comes to research, I think that what you want to do as a master's student is sometimes, I think for social sciences fields especially, where graduate level work can really amp up the quantitative methodology. So sometimes at the undergraduate level, your approaches will be more qualitative. I find this to be the case in general in undergraduate institutions. Some of you may already be doing highly quantitative research, but when it comes to the general movement of the fields of social sciences in the last 15 years, a movement towards more quantitatively based approaches that are filled out through traditional ethnographic methodologies tends to be the way that things are moving. I'm sure there are folks who would disagree with me on that general assessment, so make sure that you're talking to multiple people. But essentially, when it comes to the quality and caliber of your research at the graduate level, what you might want to do with a master's program is level up. So add a set of skills, integrate new methodologies, then use those to determine your focus, and like I said, potentially shift disciplines. When it comes to geography, there are tons of great programs in New York. I think that there are lots of great programs all around the country. I can say that one of the most useful things for a master's program can be for folks is, let's say after Barnard, you're trying to move to Texas. A great way to kind of land on your feet is to get into a program at UT and live in Austin for a year as a graduate student before then searching for a job. It's a well-worn path to try to basically try on a new city as a graduate student before moving into work in that same city. When you're applying to graduate school in social sciences, I think it's imperative that you ask the program faculty and the administrators about pathways to jobs, subsequent careers, and if doctoral pursuits are on your agenda, then definitely thinking about the placement rate into PhD programs. These are really tough questions, and as I'm sure some of you may hear, and I'm not going to really talk about it today, the academic job market for social scientists, for humanists, for STEM, really all fields, the academic job market, which is to say pursuing tenure-track faculty jobs, is very tight and always tighter, and you're always going to hear calamitous news about your odds of becoming a professor. That should not necessarily dissuade you from being a doctoral student ultimately. It definitely shouldn't dissuade you from being a master's student. What should drive you to be a graduate student at these levels is your passion for research and your openness to many different career outcomes on the other side. When it comes to these kind of Barnard and kind of general happiness questions, I think it's really good to connect to Barnard alumni. There's tons of different folks who've done master's degrees across these disciplines, psychology in particular, tons and tons and tons of MAs, but really many folks who've pursued a range of careers and graduate programs at the doctoral level have first completed a master's program. I want to emphasize something too here. I say this about a lot of programs. Master's programs are great sugar highs. They're short, you can continue your commitment to academic research, and they're done quickly. They can be expensive, not always, particularly in the social sciences, places like the London School of Economics or UCL, University College London, even Cambridge and Oxford. These places are substantially cheaper than their American counterparts in these disciplines, but they still can be pricey, and you need to think very critically and clearly about whether your desire to continue study coursework and the production of a thesis merits the amount of treasure that you'll invest in a master's program. All right, so laying out the PhD, there is a wide timeline when it comes to social sciences disciplines, and I'll lay that out in the next slide about the amount of time. But basically, like I said a few moments ago, a PhD in psychology, economics can be from 5 to 6 years old, especially more lab-based psychology can be a little bit quicker, to anthropology, sometimes sociology and political science, which can range much longer depending on language requirements, depending on field work, depending on the complexity of the project that you embark on at the start of the program, and on how much teaching you'll need to do to offset the funding that you'll receive as a PhD student. Which brings me to the next point, that many social sciences PhD programs are what's called fully funded, meaning that you'll get funding to go to those programs. You won't pay for a PhD, you'll instead receive a stipend to support your living expenses over the course of the 5 to 6 years that the program will say is expected. And then many times in the social sciences, students will get independent grants. So Fulbright dissertation write-up grants, Fulbright DDRA. You may get NSF GRFP, the National Science Foundation's marquee funding project for social scientists. You may get additional teaching responsibilities to help supplement your income throughout the program. But the main point is that at top institutions of the caliber that Barnard students typically get into, funding will likely be provided. You need, when it comes to thinking about your community, you need to think about the cohort that you are going to be entering into, so meeting other graduate students in the program, talking to Barnard alumni who have gone through those programs, and definitely connecting with multiple faculty members. The social sciences PhD is going to take you several years. You really want to know as much as you can about the individuals who are in these departments. Think about them as your future colleagues. So graduate school can have this patina of, oh, I'm entering into some kind of like, clergy almost, where there's an expected power dynamic where the lowest are the graduate students and the highest are the tenured faculty. And I actually find that the most productive social sciences PhD programs tend to be collaborative, where it feels much more like a community than a hierarchy. We talked a little bit about what you're going to be producing as a PhD student, and I'll return to that. But I think that I want to focus on geography next, which is to say that there's less flexibility when it comes to where top programs are. Top programs may be all around the country, and you need to really ask yourself, do you need to be in New York? Is New York the be-all, end-all for you? Or would you be willing to move to University of Washington, which actually sounds, all of these places sound really pleasant to me, they may not to you. Would you be willing to move to University of Arizona or UT or University of Chicago? Is going to a place so off-putting to you that you are dissuaded from a doctoral program? That's a question that's going to have to come up for you. When it comes to the career paths, I will say that in the social sciences disciplines, because of the academic job market, many faculty are becoming much more open to career paths that are outside of what has constituted traditional academia. So social scientists pursue all kinds of careers, from economists that go to work at the Fed or as consultants or as industry experts, to social scientists who go into policy, to sociologists who go into policy, political scientists who go into advocacy, etc. There's no shortage of appetite for the specific skill sets that social sciences PhDs offer. And I would say that there's appetite more now than ever before among faculty to help support students into those careers. So those are the things I'll focus on there. So I actually, and forgive me, psychologists, this is bad on me. I talked so much about psychology in the STEM presentation that I left you off this grid, but I'm happy to add to the presentation before I post it. This shows a little bit of the range of PhD disciplines, PhDs in disciplines across the social sciences field. So I have history, sociology, anthropology, political science, and econ. And you can see that the average time to degree is determined a little bit by coursework. So sometimes coursework, the amount of coursework that you're required can be reduced if you do a master's degree before a PhD. And I should have said this before, that it is much more common than previously to do a master's before enrolling in a PhD in a social sciences discipline than it used to be. It's also inflected by whether you are conducting archival work, if you're a historian, and maybe your archive access is really complicated. It can be complicated by the design of your sociological study. This happens in political science as well. It can be complicated by the amount of field work that you have to get done as an anthropologist. It can be complicated by things in econ. I've seen PhDs just kind of collect an entire set of data, figure out that their hypothesis has been largely disproven, and have to pivot and try to collect additional data. So there are lots of different kinds of wildcards to think about, lots of different things that can inflect time to degree. The important thing for you to know is that the best source of information about how long it takes to get to the end of the PhD is typically going to be the programs themselves. So if you see PhD programs with times to degree that edge towards 10 years, you should be really asking hard questions about why it takes students so long to finish in those programs. I'd want you to think, here's, I think that's Izzy, who looks kind of lonely in this farm light. She's so adorable. I want you to think about whether you have the capacity as an individual to complete independent research, right? So these programs take a long time. But do you enjoy that kind of solitary pursuit? Do you enjoy conducting research with your head down for weeks at a time and then come up and back into your community and share those results? I think mental health is a really important consideration for any student, but I think especially for those entering into doctoral programs that can be financially challenging with respect to the fact that you're making $20,000 to $25,000 to $30,000 per year for 6 and 7 years. So financially, in terms of your access to resources, I think you want to think about, are you the kind of person that thrives in that kind of independent research environment? It's just one thing I wanted to shout out there. Not to be doom and gloom, I want to be kind of forthright with you about some of the considerations that I've had, that I've seen students grappling with in the past. The bottom line though is that graduate school will be there when you are ready for it. Okay, so for those of you who are thinking that COVID must drive you to graduate school as shelter from a turbulent job market, what I would encourage you to do is to schedule advising with Beyond Barnard and talk about career options just in case. I don't think that anyone should be making a determination that they should be going to graduate school right now merely because of fear of the job market. So you'd be, if let's say you're a rising senior, you're thinking you have to apply to graduate school in order to insulate yourself from the prospect that there won't be a job at the end of this year, I would say that you'd be putting yourself through an awful lot of work. We'll talk about the application process tomorrow, on the off chance that you'll get into a program that you want to get into, and then not spending as much time looking in a concerted way for employment during the fall, when you can start networking with alumni, when you can start applying, when you can start polishing your materials. I think I want to say above all, when it comes to COVID and graduate school at this point, that graduate school has survived the actual plague. Graduate school has been around for 1,000 years, and it will survive this particular iteration of challenges. The question is really, are you as interested? Would you be as interested in graduate school right now were it not for the fact that the job market looks a little scarier, a lot scarier than it did a couple of months ago? Here's how I think you start to decide the answers to those questions. The first is that your faculty advisor is important. This is the best picture I could find of social sciences faculty, and I think smiling sociologists is like a, typically really, really good sign. So like when Mignon is like beaming with smiliness, I just want to kind of share that. Your faculty advisor is so important when it comes to thinking about your future as a graduate student. And I'd encourage you all to start talking with Barnard faculty as soon as you possibly can. You definitely also want to consult with Beyond Barnard and have conversations about how graduate school could inflect your career possibilities. And we can certainly start talking about the process. But the number one person you can talk to is the Barnard faculty about programs that could be a good fit for you. And the sooner you start doing that, the better. We are always happy to talk about how to initiate those conversations. And we can start talking about that tomorrow in the presentation about the graduate application process. So when it comes to thinking about individual programs, these are some of the differences that I find are most important to lay out when it comes to applying to a liberal arts college as an undergraduate at Barnard versus graduate school. So while you're used to thinking about applying to institutions based on that overall institution's reputation, culture, and rankings, what you really want to do at the graduate level is focus on the individual program's culture, rankings, reputation, and faculty. The way you do this, so there are websites that will rank graduate programs. But I think that one of the ways that you really identify quality research coming out of graduate programs is A, to talk to faculty members at Barnard, and B, see where journal articles are being published by faculty in your field. I'll provide you a kind of pathway into doing that research in just a moment. But you want to look not just at the fact that, oh, it's Harvard, right? Harvard might not have the best program in behavioral economics that you're thinking about applying to. That might very well be at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. It might be at an institution that is far away from the kinds of places that you applied to as an undergraduate applicant, both geographically, in terms of size, in terms of overall kind of like branding status. Those things tend to mean less when it comes down to graduate applications, particularly at the doctoral level, where you really want to find the faculty who are experts in their field and conducting path-breaking research in concert with their graduate students. I want to say a few more things about this particular breakdown here. One is that at a liberal arts college especially, there's so many resources dedicated to addressing the individual needs of students. And this, in my experience, generally at a couple of different graduate institutions working at the graduate level, this is getting better in graduate programs. However, I would say that you want to ask tough questions about graduate students' quality of life. You want to ask about the resources that are actually available when it comes to career support, when it comes to advising, when it comes to work and life in the city that you are about to commit to for 1 to 2 to 10 years of your life. It can be the case that at the graduate level, there are much fewer resources than especially students from liberal arts colleges are used to accessing. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to keep pressing forward here, but I'm happy to answer questions about the kind of liberal arts versus graduate school search. Essentially, what I want to leave you with here is just you want to think about the ways that looking for college is substantively different than looking for a graduate school that is going to be a good fit for your intellectual interests. In terms of identifying the answers to some of these questions or starting to approach questions about which program is a good fit for you, I wanted to highlight a couple here. This is just a simple list that I would check off. Like, how are you consulting resources in all of these areas? But I also wanted to kind of highlight a couple of great places to start. For those of you who are working on your thesis projects already, you'll know that EBSCO is the best place to look for really research across disciplines, but particularly strong in the social sciences. REPEC is really wonderful for those of you economists on the call this evening. REPEC is where you can really get a sense of what working papers look like. This is kind of the proving kitchen or the experimental station of economics research. Every social sciences discipline has a professional association, so I've highlighted a few here for you: the American Historical Association, the American Psychological Association, the ASA, the American Sociological Association. All of these have resources not just about graduate programs, but about the kinds of careers that are open to individuals that pursue advanced study in these fields. And then I couldn't more highly recommend the Social Sciences Research Council, which is another major granting organization across the social sciences disciplines. So you can read not only about fellowships and prizes, but also some of the resources that they have for social scientists about programs, disciplines, and career trajectories. These are the questions that I kind of want to leave you with for this evening. And I want you to kind of keep them on your mind. I hope you'll join us for several of these programs throughout this week, both about the application process, the personal statement, the alumni panel, and the faculty discussion on Friday. Why are you interested in pursuing graduate work? Is it because you want to clarify your interests? Could be time to go to a master's program. Are you certain about your commitment to an intellectual discipline or subfield? Maybe a PhD is could start to feel like a better fit. Whose advice do you value most highly, and how are you already tapping into that advice? Whose do you still need to seek, and how can you make it part of your plan for the fall to start asking questions about next steps? Do you enjoy independent research, and are you excited by the prospect of conducting research for an extended period of time? PhD, obviously, right? Are you interested in research and you think that you could benefit from a year or two of honing your research processes and methodologies to better understand where they could be leveraged in a career or in graduate school, I would lean towards a master's program. And what are the areas of growing intellectual interest and importance in your field? Why are they important? So for example, identity across various ways of describing identity. Their overlapping intersections with economic status, with national affinities or affiliations, with health outcomes, tend to be really important in lots of social sciences fields right now. Does your research align with some of those things that are really interesting to the fields themselves? If so, what are their stakes for you? Why is this work important to you? Is it important because you want to make an impact immediately in society? Is it important because you want to generate scholarship that is going to drive future students? It's going to be able to, in the cases of clinical psychology, serve patients. How are you thinking about the stakes of what you want to do with your research when you think about your future career field and how graduate school is connected to it? And finally, create a community of support for yourself. So this is Izzy and Ollie together on their bed. They only ever slept like this. We were there for 4 days, and we're probably going to go up again. So maybe we'll see if they ever sleep differently. But they were snoring so loudly and next to each other, and I just kind of thought it was a nice cuddly, like, find the people in your community who are going to support you, who are going to make you feel good about your decisions, who are going to spend the time advising you individually, and who are going to be sources of advice that can help you. And I think part of that is reflecting on your goals, conducting outreach to alumni and to faculty, and definitely meeting with us. So that includes this week. So I hope you'll join us for the rest of this week's conversations. Tomorrow we are going to start to get really nitty-gritty about the process of applying to graduate programs. We'll dig directly into that when it comes to the personal statements on Wednesday's session. And on Thursday and Friday, we'll have panel discussions among alumni and faculty. So I hope you'll join us for those. And I'm a big fan of Zoom calls that end on time. So I'm sorry, I cut ourselves a little bit short today. If you want, please send me questions directly. And I am very happy to address all of the concerns that came out of today. If you have anything that you definitely thought that we'd address today that we didn't get to, give me a shout. Like, I'm not here just to tell you this is my spiel and I'm sticking to it. I'm really happy to go on arranging conversation or to connect you with folks on the Beyond Barnard team. So thanks for asking questions throughout. Thanks for talking with each other in these breakout sessions. Send me an email and I'm happy to stay in touch. But otherwise, thanks everybody. Have a good evening, and we'll talk to you very, very soon.